Picture this. You've worked tirelessly, shattered ceilings, and earned every bit of your success. You're looking forward to a moment of peace, a small luxury, access to an exclusive airport lounge before a long flight. But instead of a welcome, you're met with disdain, a condescending refusal based on nothing but prejudice. This was Alina Jackson's reality. But what happens when the woman they scorned, the woman they deemed unworthy, holds a power they couldn't possibly imagine? This isn't just a tale of discrimination. It's a story of audacious strategy, unbreakable spirit and karma, delivered with boardroom precision. Prepare to be shocked, inspired, and utterly gripped. The crisp morning air of London Heathrow still carried a hint of dawn's chill as Alina Jackson stepped out of the sleek black Rolls-Royce Cullinan. At 38, Alina was a force of nature in the world of international finance. Her firm, Jackson Global Strategies, headquartered in the heart of the City of London, advised governments and multinational corporations on complex economic policy and investment. Today, however, she was not the formidable CEO. She was a traveller embarking on a much-needed respite to Cape Town, a reward for closing a grueling sovereign debt restructuring deal. Her British Airways first-class ticket, nestled in a Smithson travel wallet, promised a journey of comfort and tranquility, starting with the famed Concorde Room BA's most exclusive lounge at Terminal 5. She anticipated the quiet elegance, a glass of champagne, and perhaps a final review of a non-urgent brief before disconnecting. The check-in process was seamless, the attendant exuding professional warmth. Alina dressed in a flawlessly tailored Acris pantsuit in a striking sapphire blue. Her Hermes Kelly bag, her only visible concession to overt luxury, moved with an understated confidence that usually commanded respect. She approached the discreet entrance to the Concorde Room. Behind the polished oak desk stood a woman in her late 50s with severely styled grey hair and a name badge that read Patricia. Her smile, which had been present for the couple ahead of Alina, vanished as Alina stepped forward. Patricia's eyes did a swift, dismissive scan from Alina's bespoke Louboutin heels to her meticulously braided hair, lingering for a fraction of a second too long on her dark skin. "Good morning," Alina said, her voice modulated pleasant as she presented her boarding pass and passport. Patricia took the documents with the tips of her fingers as if handling something distasteful. Her gaze flickered over the first designation, then back to Alina's face. A small, tight line formed around her lips. "I'm afraid, madame," she began, her tone clipped and carrying an unmistakable air of superiority, "that access to the Concorde Room is restricted." Alina felt a familiar, unwelcome prickle. "Restricted? My ticket is first class with British Airways. Access is an explicit benefit. We are currently experiencing unforeseen capacity constraints," Patricia stated, her eyes not quite meeting Alina's. "We are prioritizing access for our gold guest list members and those on specific connecting itineraries at this precise moment." Alina glanced subtly past Patricia. The lounge, visible through a sliver of the doorway, appeared serene with numerous empty armchairs and quiet alcoves. Just moments before, she'd seen a man in a slightly crumpled suit, clearly not exuding gold guest list vibes, welcomed with a deferential nod. "Capacity constraints that selectively apply?" Alina questioned, her voice remaining calm but firm. "I find that rather peculiar. Could you please clarify the specific criteria that exclude me?" Patricia's lips thinned further. "It is a dynamic situation, madame. Management's discretion. Perhaps the gallery's first lounge would be more suitable for your needs today. It's just down the hall." The suggestion was delivered as if offering a lesser, more appropriate alternative. The implication was as clear as it was insulting. The unforeseen capacity constraints had a very specific profile. "I am not interested in the gallery's first lounge, thank you," Alina replied, the steel in her voice becoming more apparent. "I am entitled to access this lounge as per the terms of my ticket. I would appreciate it if you would either grant me access or provide me with a legitimate, non-discriminatory reason for this denial. Alternatively, I would like to speak with your duty manager." Patricia bristled. "Mr. Finch is extremely busy. I am merely relaying our current operational stance." "Then please make him unbusy." Alina stated her patience, usually a deep well beginning, to shallow. "I am not accustomed to being denied services I have paid a premium for, nor am I accustomed to such blatant gatekeeping." With a theatrical sigh, Patricia picked up a desk phone, her back stiffening. She spoke in hushed, aggrieved tones. A few minutes later, a man with a florid face and a comb-over that did little to conceal his balding pate appeared. This was Alistair Finch, the duty manager, whose demeanor radiated self-importance and irritation at being summoned. Patricia launched into a rapid, biased summary. "Insisting on entry despite my explanation about capacity. Becoming rather agitated, Alistair." Finch listened, then turned to Alina, his expression one of weary condescension. "Madam Patricia has explained the situation. The Concord Room is exceptionally popular. We have to manage numbers. It's nothing personal, just operational necessity." He didn't bother to look at her ticket. "Mr. Finch," Alina said, her voice dangerously soft. "I have been a British Airways Gold Card holder for over a decade, though I chose not to present that initially as my first-class ticket alone should suffice. I fly this route, and others frequently. I am well aware of how this lounge operates. I also have eyes. It is not at capacity. And I witnessed another passenger whose ticket class I couldn't ascertain, but who certainly didn't look like a gold guest list priority being admitted just before me." Finch's face tightened. "Are you questioning my staff's integrity, madam? We have protocols. If Patricia says we are managing capacity for certain passengers at this time, then that is the case." He waved a dismissive hand. "The gallery's lounge is perfectly adequate." The phrase, "certain passengers," hung in the air, heavy with unspoken prejudice. Alina felt a cold rage, a familiar companion from her early days, climbing the ladder in institutions not built for her. She had learned to channel it, to transform it into fuel. But the audacity of this, the sheer unadulterated arrogance, was breathtaking. "The only protocol I see being enacted here, Mr. Finch," Alina said, her gaze unwavering, "is one of discrimination. You are denying me a service based on an assumption, and I find it utterly unacceptable." A well-dressed, elderly white woman, overhearing the exchange, tutted audibly and gave Alina a disdainful look before sweeping past her into the lounge, welcomed with a warm smile by Patricia. The silence from other passengers, the averted gazes felt like complicity. Finch puffed himself up. "Now see here, I will not be accused of such things. This is a private lounge and we reserve the right to manage access. If you continue to create a disturbance, I shall have to call security." The threat, so disproportionate, so demeaning, was the final straw. The humiliation was acute not just for the denial of service, but for the public spectacle, the imputation that she was the problem. Alina held Finch's gaze for a long, charged moment, memorizing his features, Patricia's smug expression. Then, with a slow, deliberate nod, she said, "Security will not be necessary, Mr. Finch. But be assured this matter is far from over. I will be taking this up with the highest levels of British Airways. You can count on it." She turned not with anger, but with the chilling composure of a general planning a counter-offensive. As she walked away, she could almost feel Patricia's triumphant smirk burning into her back. Alina didn't go to the gallery's lounge. She found a quiet spot in the main terminal, pulled out her encrypted satellite phone, and began making calls. Her trip to Cape Town was about to be postponed. A new, far more critical project had just landed on her desk. British Airways and its Concorde room had just made a very powerful, very underestimated enemy. The unforeseen capacity constraints they had cited were about to become the least of their worries. The initial fury that had coursed through Alina Jackson was a white-hot flame. But years of navigating treacherous corporate and political landscapes had taught her to bank that fire, to let it smolder and fuel a more calculated strategic response. Public outrage on social media might offer a fleeting catharsis, perhaps even a token apology from British Airways. But Alina wasn't interested in tokenism. She sought systemic change, and if that wasn't immediately forthcoming, then she would seek leverage. Her first call was not to her PR team, but to Sir Marcus Thorne, chairman of the Thorne Group, a global logistics and private aviation conglomerate, and a man whose career Alina had discreetly saved from a hostile takeover attempt years prior. Sir Marcus owed her a significant debt of gratitude, and he also happened to sit on the advisory board of International Airlines Group, IAGBA's parent company. "Marcus, it's Alina Jackson," she said, her voice betraying none of the earlier turmoil. "I've just had a rather illuminating experience at your Heathrow Concorde room, one that I believe you and Willie Walsh's successor, Luis Gallego, would find deeply concerning from a brand reputation and legal standpoint." She recounted the incident with cold precision, omitting no detail of Patricia's disdain or Finch's dismissive arrogance. Sir Marcus listened, his initial pleasantries quickly replaced by audible dismay and then anger on her behalf. "Alina, this is outrageous, utterly unacceptable," he fumed. "This is not the BA I know, or at least not the one we aspire to be. Give me an hour. I'll get to the bottom of this personally. Expect a call from Sean Doyle's office directly." Sean Doyle was the current CEO of British Airways. True to his word, less than 45 minutes later, Alina's phone rang. It was the direct line of the Executive Vice President of Customer Experience at British Airways, a flustered and profoundly apologetic woman named Fiona McAllister. The speed and level of the response indicated Sir Marcus had indeed lit a fire under the highest echelons of the airline. "Ms. Jackson, I am Fiona McAllister. Sir Marcus Thorne has just made me aware of the appalling treatment you received this morning. Please allow me to offer my sincerest, unreserved apologies on behalf of British Airways. There is simply no excuse for what occurred." Alina listened, acknowledging the apology but not letting the airline off the hook easily. "Ms. McAllister, while I appreciate your prompt response, an apology, however sincere, doesn't address the underlying culture that permits such behavior. Your staff, Patricia and Mr. Finch, felt perfectly comfortable acting with such prejudice. That suggests a systemic issue, not an isolated incident." Fiona McAllister assured Alina that a full internal investigation was already underway, that Patricia and Mr. Finch had been immediately suspended pending its outcome, and that diversity and inclusion training protocols would be reviewed and reinforced. She offered to personally meet Alina, to rebook her flight with every conceivable VIP courtesy, to offer substantial compensation in Avios points or cash. Alina accepted the apology and the commitment to investigate. As for compensation, Fiona, let's put that aside for now. What I want is assurance of tangible change. and I want to understand how such a premier service point for a global brand like BA could fail so spectacularly. She declined the immediate rebooking. Her mind was already moving beyond this single incident. The immediate fire was being doused, but the encounter had planted a seed. It had reminded Alina of the subtle and overt aggressions that people of color, particularly black women, faced daily, even at the highest echelons of society. It wasn't just about her. It was about the principle. Later that day, after a series of calls rerouting her business affairs and postponing her Cape Town trip indefinitely, a sudden compelling investment opportunity has arisen, Anya. She'd told her ever-efficient Chief of Staff, Anya Sharma, one that requires my immediate attention here in London. Alina sat in her Mayfair apartment, not defeated, but galvanized. The apology from BA was a start. The suspension of the staff was a consequence. But Alina's mind, trained to dissect complex systems and identify points of leverage, began to churn. How were these exclusive lounges actually managed? Were they direct BA operations? Or were there layers of subcontracting, franchising, or third-party management that could dilute brand standards and accountability? She tasked her firm's elite research division, usually reserved for dissecting sovereign bond indentures or forensic accounting on hostile takeover targets, with a new project, a comprehensive analysis of the operational and ownership structures of premium airport lounge networks globally, with a specific deep dive into IAG's lounge assets and those of their major competitors. "I want to know everything," she told her head of research, Dr. Kenji Tanaka, a quiet genius with a knack for unearthing obscure data. Ownership management contracts, profitability, customer complaint patterns, particularly those related to discrimination, staff training protocols, everything. Focus on the points of failure. Where does brand promise meet operational reality, and where does it break down? Kenji, intrigued by the unusual request, promised a preliminary report within 72 hours. Alina also made a call to a contact at a leading global management consultancy, one that frequently worked with airlines. "Sarah, it's Alina. Hypothetically, if a well-capitalized private investor group were looking to enter the premium airport services market, specifically lounge operations, what would be the key opportunities and challenges? And are there any distressed or undervalued assets in that space currently?" Sarah, sensing a potential new client or a significant market move, promised to gather intelligence. The incident at Heathrow had been degrading, infuriating, but it had also inadvertently shone a spotlight on a potential vulnerability, an area where Alina's unique skill set, finance strategy, and a deep personal understanding of the need for genuine inclusivity could perhaps effect change on a much larger scale than simply getting 2 rogue employees disciplined. She thought of Patricia's sneer, Finch's dismissiveness. They had sought to diminish her, to put her in what they perceived as her place. They had no idea they might have just pointed her towards her next major acquisition. The world of airport lounges, often seen as a mere ancillary service, a cost center, might be ripe for a different kind of leadership, a different vision. A grim smile touched Alina's lips. "Be careful who you underestimate," she murmured to the empty room. The research was underway. The wheels were in motion. The initial affront was rapidly evolving into a strategic exploration. The karma Patricia and Finch were facing via BA's internal discipline was just the opening act. Alina Jackson was contemplating a far grander play. The following days were a whirlwind of intense activity for Alina Jackson and her team. While British Airways, through Fiona McAllister, continued to provide updates on their internal investigation, confirming the indefensible conduct of Patricia and Mr. Finch and outlining new mandatory empathy and anti-bias training modules for all customer-facing staff. Alina's focus had broadened considerably. Dr. Kenji Tanaka's research team at Jackson Global Strategies delivered their preliminary report with impressive speed. It was a meticulously detailed dossier, cross-referencing financial statements, industry publications like Airport World magazine, leaked internal memos from various airline groups, and aggregated anonymized customer complaint data scraped from travel forums and consumer protection sites. The findings were illuminating. While many flagship lounges like BA's Concorde Room were indeed directly managed by the airlines, a significant number of business and first-class lounges globally, especially in secondary hubs or those used by multiple alliance partners, were operated by third-party specialist companies. These companies ranged from global giants like Swissport's Aspire lounges to smaller regional players. One name, however, began to appear with intriguing frequency in relation to underperformance, inconsistent service standards, and a higher-than-average number of complaints related to staff attitude and arbitrary rule enforcement. Global Lounge Corp, GLC. GLC was a mid-tier player owning and operating a network of around 45 lounges in key international airports across Europe-Asia, and a few in North America. They weren't affiliated with one specific airline, but contracted their services out to various carriers who didn't want the overhead of managing their own lounges in certain locations. Their branding was often generic, designed to be easily co-opted by the contracting airline. The interesting thing about GLC Ms. Jackson, Kenji explained during a video conference highlighting a section of the report, is that their financials indicate a company under stress. Declining margins, aging infrastructure in many of their lounges, and recent industry chatter suggests their largest client, a consortium of second-tier Asian airlines, is threatening to pull its contract unless service standards drastically improve. Alina leaned forward, her interest piqued. Are they publicly traded or privately held? Privately held, Kenji replied. Majority ownership by a family-run investment trust based in Liechtenstein, the von Essen Trust. Known for being notoriously old-fashioned, resistant to change, and frankly underinvesting in their assets. There are whispers they might be looking for an exit strategy, but they're proud and won't want to signal desperation. Simultaneously, Alina's contact at the management consultancy, Sarah Chen, came back with her own intelligence. Alina, it's a tough market for standalone lounge operators right now. The big airlines are trying to bring more of their premium experience in-house for brand control. But for an investor with a strong vision and capital, there are opportunities to acquire, consolidate, and radically modernize. Interestingly, the name that keeps cropping up as potentially in play, though very discreetly, is Global Lounge Corp. Their reputation is mixed. Solid locations, tired product. The pieces began to click into place in Alina's mind. The incident at Heathrow, while specific to British Airways, had opened her eyes to a broader issue in the travel ecosystem. GLC, with its operational weaknesses and ownership structure, sounded like exactly the kind of undervalued, poorly managed asset that could be transformed with the right leadership and investment. It was a long shot, a significant departure from Jackson Global Strategies' usual advisory work. But Alina also managed a substantial private equity fund, Phoenix Ascent Capital, which specialized in acquiring and turning around companies with untapped potential. This felt like it could be a Phoenix Ascent play. The thought was audacious. To go from being humiliated in one lounge to potentially owning a network of them. The irony was not lost on her, but it was more than irony. It was a challenge. Could she take a company like GLC, riddled with the very issues she had personally experienced, and reshape it into a beacon of genuine hospitality and inclusivity. She convened an emergency board meeting for Phoenix Ascent Capital. Her board members, a collection of seasoned financiers and industry veterans, were initially taken aback by the proposal. Airport lounges, Alina, one of them. Lord Ashworth, a venerable figure in city finance, questioned. It's hardly cutting-edge tech or sovereign finance. True, Charles, Alina responded calmly. But it's a sector ripe for disruption, not through technology alone, but through a fundamental shift in customer experience philosophy. Travel is becoming more accessible, but the premium experience often feels exclusionary, stuck in outdated modes of thinking. There's a multi-billion-dollar market for passengers who will pay for comfort, respect, and seamless service. GLC has the footprint. They lack the vision and the operational excellence. She laid out Kenji's research, Sarah Chen's market analysis, and her own burgeoning vision for a new kind of lounge network, technologically advanced, yes, with personalized services and streamlined access, but more importantly built on a foundation of radical hospitality. Lounges that weren't just waiting rooms with better chairs, but destinations in themselves reflecting local culture, offering unique amenities, and staffed by professionals trained to the highest standards of inclusive service. Think of it, she urged, her voice passionate, a network where a first-class ticket truly means first-class treatment for everyone regardless of their appearance, age, or accent, where staff are empowered to solve problems, not create them, where the design is inspiring, the food is exceptional, and the welcome is genuine. She didn't explicitly mention her Heathrow experience to the board. It wasn't strictly relevant to the financial case, but the conviction in her voice, born from that very personal sting, was palpable. After a rigorous debate, scrutinizing the preliminary financials and market risks, the board, trusting Alina's formidable track record and the sheer force of her vision, gave her cautious approval to explore a potential acquisition of Global Lounge Corp. The caveat: it had to make financial sense. This wasn't a vanity project. Alina's next step was to discreetly approach the von Essen Trust. This required finesse. A direct, unsolicited offer from a firm like Phoenix Ascent might be rebuffed out of pride. She decided to use a trusted intermediary, a discreet Swiss private banker who had dealings with many old European moneyed families. The message conveyed was subtle. A well-capitalized, forward-thinking investment group was looking to expand into the travel hospitality sector and was impressed by GLC's international footprint. They were interested in discussing a potential partnership or acquisition that could provide GLC with the capital and strategic vision to thrive in the modern travel landscape while allowing the current owners a graceful and profitable exit. Weeks of delicate behind-the-scenes maneuvering followed. The von Essen Trust, initially wary, began to see the potential benefits. Their younger generation was less attached to the lounge business and more interested in liquidating assets to pursue other ventures. The prospect of a clean sale to a reputable buyer, rather than a slow decline into insolvency or a messy breakup of assets, became increasingly attractive. Due diligence began in earnest. Alina's team, operating with surgical precision, descended upon GLC's financials, operational audits, and HR records. What they found confirmed their initial assessment. A company with good bones, prime airport locations, long-term leases, but suffering from chronic underinvestment and a deeply ingrained problematic corporate culture that trickled down to frontline staff. Complaints similar to Alina's Heathrow experience, though perhaps less articulately expressed or escalated, were peppered throughout GLC's internal records, often dismissed by regional managers as isolated incidents or difficult customers. The irony was almost overwhelming. The very attitudes and failures that had incensed Alina were now laid bare in the company she was considering buying. It was a mess, but it was a mess she felt uniquely qualified to clean up. "This isn't just an investment, Anya," Alina confided in her chief of staff one late evening, surrounded by due diligence reports in her office overlooking the twinkling lights of London. "This is a mission. If we can turn this company around, if we can make GLC a global standard for what a truly welcoming and respectful travel experience should be, that would be a statement." The decision crystallized. Phoenix Ascent Capital would make a formal, compelling offer to acquire Global Lounge Corp. The price would be fair, but not inflated, reflecting the significant investment required for refurbishment, retraining, and rebranding. The journey that had begun with a moment of profound disrespect at a British Airways lounge was now leading Alina Jackson to the brink of becoming a major player in the very industry that had slighted her. The karma was no longer just about 2 suspended employees at Heathrow. It was about the potential to reshape an entire company, to rewrite the rules of engagement for thousands of travelers. The stakes were high, but Alina felt a sense of purpose she hadn't anticipated. This was no longer just business. It was personal in the most transformative way possible. The negotiations with the Von Essen Trust for the acquisition of Global Lounge Corp, GLC, were complex and at times fraught. The trust, while keen on an exit, was represented by old guard lawyers who haggled over every clause, their pride seemingly invested in extracting maximum value from what they still perceived as a prestigious family asset, despite its evident decline. Alina Jackson, however, was a past master at negotiation. She had faced down finance ministers of G7 nations and CEOs of Fortune 500 companies. The Von Essen representatives, with their stiff formality and veiled condescension, were challenging, but not insurmountable. Phoenix Ascent Capital's offer was robust, backed by a clear, ambitious turnaround plan that promised to inject new life and capital into GLC. Crucially, Alina's team had identified several skeletons in the closet during due diligence, undisclosed liabilities, and looming contract renegotiations, which gave them significant leverage. "We are not just buying a collection of airport lounges, gentlemen," Alina stated coolly during one particularly tense video conference with the trust's lead negotiator, a Baron von Unzuhauser, who seemed to embody centuries of aristocratic hauteur. "We are buying potential, yes, but also a significant amount of deferred maintenance reputational damage and what appears to be a deeply unmotivated workforce. Our offer reflects the substantial investment required to rectify these issues and transform GLC into a profitable world-class operation. It is more than fair. It is generous." After several weeks of intense back and forth, punctuated by late-night strategy sessions with her M&A team, a deal was struck. Phoenix Ascent Capital would acquire 100% of Global Lounge Corp. The final price was slightly higher than Alina's initial target, but well within her acceptable range, especially given the strategic value she placed on the acquisition. The day the contracts were signed, there was no grand celebration. For Alina, it was a moment of quiet satisfaction and immense responsibility. She now owned a network of 45 airport lounges across the globe, many of which were, by her own assessment, failing their customers and their staff. The internal announcement at GLC was carefully managed. Employees were informed that their company had been acquired by Phoenix Ascent Capital, a private investment firm known for strategic growth and operational excellence. Alina Jackson was named as the incoming executive chairwoman of the newly restructured entity, which she decided to rename Ascendia Lounges. The name was chosen to signify a new beginning, an upward trajectory, and a commitment to elevating the travel experience. The existing GLC senior management, many of whom were part of the old guard and resistant to change, were offered generous severance packages. Alina knew that a cultural transformation required new leadership from the top down. She began assembling her own team, poaching top talent from the hospitality, aviation, and customer experience sectors. Eleanor Vance, the no-nonsense former COO of a luxury hotel chain known for its impeccable service standards, was brought in as CEO of Ascendia Lounges. "Eleanor," Alina instructed in their first strategy meeting, "our mission is twofold. First, stabilize and standardize. Bring every lounge up to a baseline of excellence in terms of cleanliness, amenities, and basic service. Second, and more importantly, we transform the culture. Every single employee, from lounge attendant to regional manager, must understand that our core product is not just a comfortable chair and a free drink. It's respect, dignity, and genuine hospitality for every guest." The first few months were a whirlwind. Alina and Eleanor personally visited dozens of Ascendia Lounges, often unannounced. They observed operations, spoke to staff, and crucially listened to passengers. Some lounges were better than others, but the overall picture confirmed the due diligence findings: inconsistent service-tired facilities and a pervasive lack of empowerment among frontline staff. One of Alina's first major initiatives was the Ascendia Academy, a state-of-the-art training program mandatory for all employees. It wasn't just about operational procedures, it was heavily focused on empathy, cultural sensitivity, conflict resolution, the right way, not Finch's way, and unconscious bias training. She even brought in consultants who had worked with organizations like the Ritz-Carlton and Singapore Airlines to help design the curriculum. Simultaneously, a massive capital investment program was launched. Lounges were renovated with designs that were modern, comfortable, and reflective of local art and culture. Technology was upgraded. Faster Wi-Fi, more power outlets, new systems for streamlined entry, and even apps for ordering food and drinks or requesting assistance. Food and beverage offerings were completely overhauled, moving away from stale pastries and uninspired buffets to fresh, locally sourced options and premium beverages. The changes were radical and not without resistance. Some long-term GLC employees grumbled about the new standards, the intensive training, the touchy-feely stuff. But Alina and Eleanor were unyielding. Those who couldn't or wouldn't adapt were managed out. Those who embraced the new vision were rewarded and promoted. Slowly, painstakingly, the culture began to shift. Customer satisfaction scores, initially abysmal, started to tick upwards. Positive mentions on social media began to outnumber the complaints. Airlines contracting with Ascendia Lounges noticed the difference and began to extend and even expand their contracts. Throughout this period, Alina never forgot the incident at Heathrow that had inadvertently set her on this path. Patricia and Mr. Finch had, as per BA's internal processes, been dismissed. British Airways itself had implemented significant changes to its own training and oversight, with Fiona McAllister regularly updating Alina on their progress as a courtesy. The relationship born of conflict had evolved into one of mutual professional respect. Alina made a point of ensuring that one of the first Ascendia Lounges to be fully renovated and retrained to the new standards was the one at Heathrow Terminal 3, a former GLC lounge that had been notorious for poor service. She wanted a flagship, a clear demonstration of the Ascendia difference right in the airport, where her journey had begun. It was nearly a year after the acquisition. Ascendia Lounges was still a work in progress, but the transformation was undeniable. Alina, though still chairwoman of Jackson Global Strategies, found herself increasingly passionate about this new venture. It was a different kind of challenge, more tangible, more directly impactful on people's everyday experiences. One crisp autumn morning, Alina found herself booked on a flight to New York for a financial conference. Her flight was departing from Heathrow Terminal 3. Her PA had of course ensured her access to the newly rebranded Ascendia Lounge. As she approached the entrance, no longer a generic GLC facade, but a stylish, welcoming space with the new Ascendia branding, she felt a sense of quiet pride. This was what she was building. The attendant at the desk was a young man with a warm, genuine smile. He greeted her professionally, checked her boarding pass, and welcomed her in. "Good morning, Ms. Jackson. Welcome to Ascendia. We hope you have a wonderful flight." No hesitation, no disdain, just simple, respectful service. It was a small moment, but it spoke volumes. The ascent was well underway. But there was one more piece of unfinished business. One more circle to close, related to the very specific individuals who had acted as the catalyst for this entire saga. The universe, Alina believed, had a funny way of arranging such encounters. Alina settled into a plush armchair in the newly refurbished Ascendia Lounge at Heathrow Terminal 3. The space was unrecognizable from its tired, dated GLC predecessor. Warm, ambient lighting bathed the room, contemporary British art adorned the walls with understated elegance. A quiet hum of contented passengers mingled with the silent efficiency of attentive staff moving with quiet purpose. She ordered a freshly squeezed orange juice and a croissant that was, to her pleasant surprise, perfectly flaky and delicious. This was the standard she had envisioned, a tangible testament to her vision made reality. As she was reviewing her notes for the New York conference, Eleanor Vance, the CEO of Ascendia Lounges, approached her table. Eleanor had flown in from their Paris office for a series of important meetings. "Alina, good to see you," Eleanor said, her expression a mixture of professional respect and something else, a knowing, almost conspiratorial look. "Enjoying the fruits of your labor, are we?" "It's certainly a vast improvement, Eleanor. The team here has done excellent work," Alina replied, a faint smile playing on her lips. "You look like you have some news to share." Eleanor smiled faintly, a discreet but amused expression. "Potentially. A rather interesting HR flag came up yesterday. Do you remember Patricia Miller and Alistair Finch from your initial, rather unpleasant BA experience?" Alina's expression sharpened slightly, though only for a fleeting moment. "Those names are not easily forgotten." The memory of Patricia's haughty arrogance and Finch's dismissive, condescending attitude remained vivid in her mind, not as a festering wound, but as a constant reminder of the profound reasons that had compelled her to embark on this challenging but meaningful path. "Well?" Eleanor continued, her tone still casual, but with an undercurrent of amusement. "After their dismissal from British Airways, it seems they found it rather difficult to secure comparable employment in the aviation sector. Word gets around, as you know. Good news travels fast, but bad news travels even faster. Finch, from what I gather, had to take a significant step down and ended up as a shift supervisor for a budget ground handling company. Patricia Miller, however, has been job hunting for the better part of a year, quite unsuccessfully. And then yesterday, quite astonishingly, an application landed on our HR portal for a standard lounge attendant position at our newly opened Ascendia Lounge in Manchester." Alina raised an eyebrow. The irony of the situation was almost too perfect, like a scene scripted by a mischievous playwright. Patricia Miller applied to work for Ascendia. Indeed, no mistake. Eleanor confirmed, her eyes twinkling with amusement. She obviously has no idea whatsoever of the connection between Ascendia and Phoenix Ascent, or your pivotal role in all of this. The application was under her maiden name, which she seems to have reverted to, Patricia Jennings, but the employment history after our HR department conducted a more thorough background check matched perfectly. She listed her experience as customer service in premium travel environments and conveniently omitted the real reason for her departure from BA. A slow, thoughtful smile spread across Alina's face. It wasn't a smile of malice or smug satisfaction, but one of profound appreciation for the almost cosmic irony of life. And what was HR's recommendation? Standard procedure, Eleanor explained, would be to decline as the reference check from BA would undoubtedly be negative if they dug deep enough, or at the very least it would flag her departure as not eligible for rehire. But Eleanor paused for a moment, her gaze meeting Alina's with a knowing look. Given the unique circumstances and the fact that Manchester is one of our new model lounges where we are focusing significant resources on intensive training and oversight, I thought you might have a particular perspective, a more strategic decision to make. Alina considered this carefully. The thought of Patricia Miller, the woman whose sneering condescension and blatant prejudice had been so profoundly insulting, now seeking basic employment in a company she owned, a company built upon the very principles of respect and dignity that Patricia had so flagrantly violated without a hint of remorse, was almost too perfectly karmic. It wasn't a feeling of vengeful glee, but a cool, objective recognition of how the world sometimes, in its own inscrutable ways, readjusts its own balance. Does she meet the basic qualifications for an attendant role if we temporarily set aside her past conduct? Alina asked, her voice maintaining the calm, analytical tone of a leader. On paper, yes, Eleanor admitted. She has many years of experience, although her approach and attitude were clearly problematic. She is familiar with airport operating systems, security procedures, and the basic requirements of a customer-facing role in what is supposed to be a premium environment. Then invite her for an interview, Eleanor, Alina decided after a moment of contemplation, her expression thoughtful but resolute. In Manchester. I think I'll make a small detour and adjustment to my schedule on my way back from New York. I would like to be part of the final interview panel. Anonymously, of course, as a visiting senior executive from head office for an inspection. Let's just call me Miss Smith for the day. Eleanor's eyes widened slightly in surprise. Then she grinned, fully understanding Alina's intention. Consider it done. This should be highly educational for all involved. She understood the subtlety and foresight in Alina's approach. This wasn't a trap sprung out of malice or a desire to humiliate, but an opportunity to confront the past in a controlled manner and, perhaps more importantly, for Patricia Miller herself to realize her serious shortcomings when faced with a new standard, a new work environment, blissfully unaware that the architect of those standards was the very person she had once scorned. A week later, Alina, back from her highly successful trip to New York, where incidentally but no less importantly, she had secured a major new contract for Jackson Global Strategies, found herself sitting in a small, unassuming interview room at the Ascendia Lounge in Manchester Airport. She was dressed in a simple but elegant business dress, her demeanor professional and keenly observant. She was introduced to the other two members of the interview panel, the local lounge manager, a dynamic young woman named Sarah, and an experienced HR representative, David, as Ms. Smith from our corporate development team. The room was clean, modern, but intentionally not overly lavish, reflecting Ascendia's commitment to substantive quality over superficial ostentation. Patricia Miller, or Jennings as she now called herself, was ushered in. She looked older, more careworn, and somewhat haggard than Alina remembered. The severe, rigidly styled hair was still in place, but the arrogance, the haughty self-assurance that had once defined her, had completely vanished, replaced by an ill-concealed nervous tension. It was evident that she desperately needed this job. Her eyes flickered briefly over the panel members, lingering for a moment on Ms. Smith without any sign of recognition. To Patricia, Alina was just another anonymous face, another faceless executive who now held her fragile professional future in her hands. The interview began normally following standard procedure. Sarah, the lounge manager, started by asking about Patricia's previous work, experience at other airlines, including her tenure at British Airways. Patricia answered the questions mechanically, as if reciting from a script listing her duties and responsibilities. She tried to emphasize her ability to handle high-pressure situations and maintain high standards of service. Her tone was a little too confident, almost boastful, as if trying to compensate for an underlying desperation and insecurity. David, the HR representative, then delved deeper, asking about her strengths and weaknesses and how she typically handled difficult customers or stressful situations. Patricia offered textbook answers, polished and articulate, but utterly lacking in genuine warmth or empathy. She spoke of managing customer expectations effectively and the necessity of consistently and fairly adhering to company policies. There was not the slightest indication that she had ever reflected on the potential impact, the emotional damage that a rigid, unfeeling adherence to policies could inflict on the customer experience. Then it was Alina's turn as Ms. Smith. The atmosphere in the room seemed to shift subtly, becoming more charged. Alina's voice remained even and calm, but there was an underlying weight, an unspoken authority in it. "Mrs. Jennings," Alina began, her voice clear and composed, compelling attention. Ascendia Lounges has a very strong operational philosophy centered on inclusivity and ensuring that every single guest, without exception, feels genuinely welcomed and respected, regardless of their background, appearance, or ticket class. Could you describe a specific instance in your previous roles where you went above and beyond your duties to make a guest from a different cultural background? Or perhaps someone who seemed a little unsure or out of place feel particularly comfortable and valued? Patricia hesitated. A flicker of something, confusion, discomfort. Or was it a blankness, an inability to recall such an instance, crossed her face. She tried to search her memory, then offered a vague, generic anecdote about helping a non-English-speaking passenger find their departure gate, an answer that, while demonstrating competence, hardly inspired confidence or showed any real empathy. It lacked specific details, the genuine emotional connection that Alina was looking for. Alina gently pressed further, her voice still neutral but probing like a physician searching for a symptom. And conversely, can you recall a time when perhaps a guest was denied a service they felt they were fully entitled to? How would you handle such a situation to ensure that even if the final answer is no, the guest still feels heard and respected, rather than dismissed, ignored, or worse, made to feel humiliated? Upon hearing the word humiliated, Patricia flinched, an almost imperceptible reaction, but one that did not escape Alina's keen observation. Her eyes darted quickly towards Alina. A flicker of unease, a vague sense of alarm in them. It was too specific a word, too evocative, touching a memory she had perhaps tried to suppress. "Well," she began, her voice a little strained, losing its earlier forced confidence. Of course, one must always maintain a polite demeanor. But rules are rules. Sometimes customers, they misunderstand their entitlements. She was trying to sound reasonable, but there was a clear defensiveness in her tone, as if trying to justify something. But can rules sometimes be applied? Selectively, Ms. Jennings? Alina asked, her gaze steady, looking directly at Patricia, unwavering. Or applied in a manner that might make a guest feel singled out, treated unfairly or unwelcome based on other factors. Factors unrelated to the regulations. The question was posed gently, but its implication was sharp, like a precisely aimed scalpel cutting straight to Patricia's weak point. Patricia was now visibly profoundly uncomfortable. She shifted uneasily in her chair, as if sitting on hot coals. The knuckles of her hands, clasped tightly on the handbag in her lap, turned white. I have always striven to treat everyone fairly, she stammered, her voice losing its fluency. Company policy is paramount. One cannot simply ignore directives, the regulations that have been established. Alina allowed the silence to hang heavy in the room for a moment. She could clearly see the growing confusion, the bewilderment in Patricia's eyes, an intense internal struggle as the questions from Ms. Smith began to touch upon uncomfortable, unwelcome corners of her memory. The lounge manager and the HR representative exchanged uneasy glances, sensing the unusual tension, the almost palpable undercurrent of the interview. Then Alina leaned forward slightly, her voice still maintaining its usual professional calm, but with an unmistakable sharpness, an undeniable authority. Ms. Jennings, I was once a passenger at a lounge holding a perfectly valid first-class ticket for a very reputable and prestigious airline. However, I was denied access by an agent who cited capacity constraints as the reason, even though the lounge at that time was visibly not crowded and other passengers were being admitted without issue. That agent and her supervisor were exceedingly dismissive, condescending, and they made me feel utterly humiliated, a feeling I will never forget. The only justification they offered was policy, and that is management's discretion. So, madam, what advice would you offer to an organization whose frontline staff, the very people who represent the face of the company, behave in such a disappointing and unacceptable manner? All color drained from Patricia's face. Her eyes widened, staring at Ms. Smith with an expression of unadulterated horror. A terrible suspicion, a dawning recognition that was as certain as a recurring nightmare began to play out in her eyes. She looked from Alina to the HR representative, then back to Alina, her mouth slightly agape, unable to utter a single word. The words of Ms. Smith were no longer a distant hypothesis. They were an indictment thinly veiled, a precise reenactment of an event in which she had been a key protagonist. The details about the first-class ticket, capacity constraints, dismissive condescending, utterly humiliated. They were too accurate, too familiar, like pieces of a terrifying memory puzzle slowly falling into place. A specific memory, a specific face she had tried to bury, was now resurfacing with cruel clarity. Alina maintained her calm, professional demeanor, betraying no personal emotion. Of course, that is merely a hypothetical situation, but it is very relevant to our commitment to exceptional, always respectful customer service here at Ascendia. Patricia swallowed hard, her throat feeling dry, constricted. That would be completely unacceptable conduct, Ms. Smith, she finally managed to say, but her voice was barely a weak, trembling whisper. A most serious violation of the ethical and professional standards of any reputable company. It would warrant comprehensive and rigorous retraining, or even dismissal. Every word that escaped her lips was shaky heavy as the full weight of recognition, and its terrifying implications crashed down upon her like a ton of bricks. "Indeed," Alina said softly, her voice devoid of any triumph, only the cool affirmation of an undeniable truth. "Thank you, Miss Jennings. That will be all." Patricia almost stumbled, staggering out of the room, her face ashen like a corpse. Her feigned confidence had completely evaporated, leaving only the emptiness of horror, and perhaps a belated, futile regret. As the door closed behind her, she leaned against the corridor wall, struggling to breathe deeply to regain her composure. The image of Miss Smith. No, the image of the woman she had once scorned, treated so poorly at Heathrow, now loomed large in her mind, not as a pitiful, rejected passenger, but as a figure of immense power, a judge, the one who held her fate in her hands. Once she had gone, the lounge manager and the HR representative looked at Alina, their faces a mixture of bewilderment and surprise at the intensity of the exchange and the sudden complete collapse of the candidate. "A rather interesting candidate," Alina commented mildly, no trace of emotion on her face, "but perhaps not entirely suitable for the Ascendia culture that we are diligently building." Later that day, Patricia Jennings received a polite standard form email informing her that Ascendia Lounges would not be proceeding with her application. No specific reason was given. That silence, in a way, was heavier and more damaging than even a direct, detailed rejection. Alistair Finch, meanwhile, continued his career supervising baggage handlers at a small airport. A daily bitter reminder of his fall from the perceived prestige and power of the Concorde room. His attempts to return to premium customer service roles in the aviation industry were consistently rebuffed. His reputation, like Patricia's, had preceded him like a haunting spectre. For Alina Jackson, the encounter with Patricia was not about revenge. Revenge was a shallow, negative emotion, unworthy of her energy and vision. It was about closing an old chapter decisively, and more importantly, about strongly affirming the new standard, the core values she had established for Ascendia. Ascendia Lounges would never be a place where prejudice discrimination could hide behind a uniform or a job title. The heavy karma that had befallen Patricia and Finch was not a dramatic, publicly staged humiliation, but the quiet, slow, yet inexorable consequence of their own actions, their wrong choices in the past playing out in the stark, unforgiving reality of their increasingly diminished careers. Alina's true satisfaction came not from their downfall or misfortune, but from the thriving, respectful, and genuinely welcoming work environment she was building and nurturing every day with Ascendia Lounges. She had transformed a moment of personal humiliation, a profound insult, into a powerful driving force for positive change, creating a business that not only achieved outstanding financial success, but also championed and protected the dignity of every traveler, every individual. The initial affront at Heathrow had inadvertently become a catalyst, leading to an ascent, an extraordinary journey she could never have predicted, and in doing so had set a new, higher, more humane standard for the entire airline service industry. The visit to Manchester was not merely a routine interview. It was a resounding affirmation that the core values of Ascendia were not just empty words on paper, but a living reality enforced rigorously and consistently from the highest levels of management down to every frontline employee. Alina Jackson's journey from a moment of humiliating discrimination to the helm of a revitalized international lounge network is a powerful testament to resilience and strategic brilliance. The karma for Patricia and Finch wasn't just about losing their jobs. It was about facing a world that increasingly valued the respect and dignity they had so easily denied others. Alina didn't just seek retribution. She built an empire founded on inclusivity. Ascendaya lounges became a symbol of change, proving that ethical business and commercial success can go hand in hand. Her story reminds us that sometimes the greatest response to injustice is not just to fight back, but to rebuild the system from the ground up, creating a better reality for everyone. What are your biggest takeaways from Alina's incredible story? Have you ever seen someone turn a negative experience into such a powerful catalyst for change? Let us know in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more narratives of empowerment and transformation. Your engagement helps us tell these important stories.